If you step back and look closely at what is unfolding across the Middle East right now, it does not resemble a president carefully directing a conflict toward a strategic goal. What it resembles instead is a president watching a war slip beyond his control. Donald Trump is now openly warning Americans to brace for large numbers of deaths. Those are his own words. He says the conflict could stretch on for 4 or 5 weeks. He claims he intends to apply what he calls the Venezuela model to Iran. At the same time, he insists the United States is engaged in productive dialogue with Iran's senior leadership. Yet Iran's top negotiator has already dismissed that claim publicly, calling it nothing more than a delusional fantasy. While those statements circulate, events on the ground are moving in a very different direction. An American F-15 Strike Eagle has gone down over Kuwait after being hit in a friendly fire incident. Iranian ballistic missiles have begun breaking through Israel's Iron Dome defense system. American embassies throughout the region are facing sieges. Militias aligned with Iran have destroyed an American ammunition facility in Erbil. Financial markets are reacting as well. Overnight, Dow futures dropped roughly 500 points while crude oil surged more than 7%, climbing past $70 a barrel. None of this resembles a campaign steadily moving toward victory. Instead, it looks like the early stages of a disaster assembling itself piece by piece in real time. Over the next few minutes, we are going to examine what has just happened, why Iran's chief negotiator publicly dismantled Trump's narrative online, and why the economic and military consequences of this conflict are about to land directly in the lives of ordinary people. Imagine for a moment that you are sitting at a negotiation table during a high-stakes business deal. The agreement is nearly complete. Your counterpart is prepared to sign the contract. Then, instead of closing the deal, you flip the table over, strike the other party, and immediately call a reporter to announce that negotiations are going extremely well. How long would it take for everyone in the room to realize you are not conducting a negotiation at all, but simply smashing the process while pretending it is diplomacy? Keep that image in mind because it closely mirrors what the Trump administration has just done with Iran. Reports indicated a deal was within reach. Oman had been mediating and suggested that a workable framework already existed. Yet instead of finalizing the agreement, the administration launched a military invasion and is now publicly claiming that the very people being bombed are engaged in productive discussions. Think about that contradiction for a moment. Is that negotiation, or is it something closer to political theater wrapped in diplomatic language? To understand how this situation developed, we have to rewind the timeline slightly. Before the missiles began flying, one of the central figures involved in talks was Ali Larijani. He serves as the secretary of Iran's National Security Council and had been acting as the chief negotiator in discussions with the United States through mediation by Oman's foreign minister. On February 12, 2026, just 3 weeks before the invasion began, Larijani appeared publicly and described the situation in detail. He explained that Iran's negotiations were taking place directly with the United States. He also warned that Israel had inserted itself into the process with the goal of undermining and sabotaging those talks. According to him, Israel's strategy involved destabilizing the broader region. He specifically mentioned that leaders in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey should pay close attention to what was happening. That statement now reads like a roadmap of what followed. But at the time, Washington did not act on the warning, or perhaps more accurately, those who recognized the warning were overruled by others who were pushing toward confrontation. Now Larijani has reappeared, not as a negotiator seeking compromise, but as a wartime spokesman. And his message is unmistakably clear. First, consider what happened after reports emerged that the United States was in discussions with him. Donald Trump publicly suggested that those conversations were progressing well. Larijani responded directly on social media with a statement that would likely become a case study in future foreign policy classrooms. He argued that Trump had plunged the region into chaos because of delusional fantasies and now feared increasing American casualties. He accused Trump of transforming the slogan America First into Israel First, claiming American soldiers were being sacrificed to satisfy Israel's ambitions. He added that Trump's fabrications were once again placing the burden of his political choices on American families and troops. Then he ended his statement with a blunt declaration. The Iranian nation, he said, was defending itself. Iran's armed forces did not initiate the aggression. That is not the language of a government quietly negotiating behind the scenes. It is the language of a government that believes diplomacy has ended. Trump told Americans he was negotiating. Iran told the world he was not. And the distance between those two narratives is now being filled with missile strikes and casualties. The next piece of evidence is the friendly fire crash and the broader military situation that surrounds it. Earlier today, an American F-15E Strike Eagle crashed over Kuwait after being hit by a live fire. Both crew members, pilot, and the weapons systems officer appear to have survived. Local residents located them and transferred them to Kuwaiti authorities. The symbolism of that moment is almost impossible to ignore. A fighter jet brought down not by an enemy missile but by its own side, falling into the territory of an ally. Yet the crash is not an isolated accident. It appears to be one symptom of a wider pattern. Iran has continued launching retaliatory strikes across multiple parts of the region. Missiles have struck near Dubai, Doha, and Manama, the capital of Bahrain. Additional attacks have targeted Israel, where some Iranian ballistic missiles have penetrated the Iron Dome defense network. In Erbil, Iraq, drones operated by a militia aligned with Iran destroyed an American ammunition factory. At the same time, U.S. embassies across the region are being stormed, largely by Shiite militia groups loyal to Iran's leadership. Iran has activated its entire network of regional proxies, precisely the network intelligence analysts warned would mobilize if a conflict erupted. Outside Baghdad's green zone, scenes are chaotic. In Jerusalem, video footage from the previous night shows a missile striking its target directly. Taken together, the operational picture does not suggest overwhelming American dominance. Instead, it suggests overextension, multiple fronts opening simultaneously, while civilian leadership struggles to articulate a clear strategy. While American troops are engaged in this escalating conflict in the Middle East, another development is unfolding in Asia. Reports indicate the Trump administration has postponed $13 billion in congressionally approved arms sales to Taiwan. The stated reason is the desire to ensure a smooth summit meeting with China's President, Xi Jinping, scheduled for April. The war with Iran has also redirected military resources away from the Pacific. Consider what that means in practice. Xi Jinping reportedly told Trump that the United States could not provide additional weapons to Taiwan, could not allow Twins' president to travel through American airspace, and could not expand support for Twins' defense. In each case, Trump complied. Last year he blocked Twins' president from passing through U.S. airspace while traveling to Central America. Now he has frozen military assistance already approved by Congress. This is the same president who frequently claims to be the toughest leader in American history. Yet he appears willing to follow China's preferences on Taiwan while simultaneously opening a new war in the Middle East to demonstrate strength. The image of toughness is largely directed at domestic audiences. Internationally, many rival powers seem to view the situation very differently. China is quietly shielding Iran diplomatically. Russia is watching events unfold with visible satisfaction. Meanwhile, the United States is consuming munitions, credibility, and lives in a conflict that may ultimately strengthen its strategic competitors. At this point, it is worth stepping back and recognizing that two very different models of power are being displayed. On one side, Iran has responded to the assassination of its supreme leader with institutional continuity. Its military retaliation has been coordinated across several theaters. Proxy forces from Iraq to Lebanon to Yemen have been activated. Public messaging has remained disciplined and consistent. Blarigin's statement was not an emotional rant. It was calculated communication aimed directly at dividing American public opinion from American policy. Now compare that with the messaging coming from Washington. Trump says the war might last for 5 weeks, even though initial planning suggested only a few days. He claims negotiations are happening with leaders who insist none exist. He promises a scenario similar to Venezuela, where his attempt at regime change also failed. His vice president struggles to define clear war objectives. His defense secretary promises the conflict will not become prolonged even as casualties rise. Senator Lindsey Graham appears on television calling for additional wars with Cuba and Hezbollah while American families bury their children. and the president himself avoided military service with claims of bone spurs, stands before the nation and explains that more Americans will die and that this is simply the reality of war. One side built redundancy and institutional discipline into its command structure. The other built its strategy around a single political figure managing the narrative in real time. Over a multi-week conflict, that imbalance may prove unsustainable. So what does this actually mean for ordinary people watching from home? If you drive a car, purchase fuel, heat your house, or buy products transported by truck or ship, you will likely feel the economic impact soon. Oil prices have already jumped more than 7% overnight. If disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz continue, analysts warn that prices could rise dramatically. The drop in Dow futures affects retirement accounts, savings, and pension funds. Families with relatives in the military have already been warned to expect additional casualties. Americans living in the Middle East have been told by the State Department that assistance may be limited. Meanwhile, resources that many defense experts believe should be focused on the Pacific, particularly regarding China and Taiwan, are being consumed in a conflict without a clearly defined objective or exit strategy. Once military assets are redirected, diplomatic credibility damaged, and alliances strained, those losses rarely reverse easily. They become the new baseline. Where does the conflict go from here? There are three realistic possibilities. The first is a managed exit. Back-channel communication, perhaps through China, produces some type of ceasefire framework. Both sides claim victory. Trump declares that Iran's nuclear infrastructure has been crippled. Iran claims it successfully defended itself and imposed heavy costs. The shooting stops, but the damage to alliances and regional stability remains. The second possibility involves regional realignment. Gulf states, now targets in a war they did not initiate, begin accelerating partnerships with China or alternative security arrangements. Iran's proxy network becomes a permanent feature of regional power rather than a dormant threat. European allies such as France, which has already declined to provide offensive support, quietly reassess their relationships with Washington. The United States remains militarily powerful but increasingly isolated within a region, reorganizing itself without American leadership. The third scenario is the one few officials want to name publicly: full escalation. Iran continues retaliatory strikes. Political pressure and Washington pushes for further military action. Ground troops are deployed despite earlier promises. China increases support to Iran. Russia exploits the distraction elsewhere. A regional conflict slowly expands into a global crisis carrying nuclear implications. And at the center of every decision is a leader whose approach to war has been defined as much by spectacle as by strategy. Whatever happens next, one reality is already clear. The framework that existed before this war has been shattered. The assumption that the United States could launch a preemptive strike, claim negotiations were underway while the other side denied it, suspend billions in Taiwan defense commitments to satisfy China, and still be viewed as the unquestioned guarantor of global order has now been tested. And the result of that test has been deeply destabilizing. Ali Larijani warned 3 weeks before the invasion that negotiations were being sabotaged and that regional leaders should pay attention. Washington did not act on that warning. Instead, the situation accelerated. Trump did not construct a long-term strategy. He constructed a spectacle. And spectacles rarely win wars. They create casualties, economic shockwaves, and alliances that quietly reorganize around the aftermath. So the question now is simple. Did Iran outmaneuver the United States? Or did the United States ultimately outmaneuver itself? Can the conflict still be contained, or has the escalation spiral already begun? And one political figure's call for expanding the war even further while American troops are already dying. Is that strategic thinking or something far more dangerous? Those are the questions now confronting policymakers, soldiers, and citizens alike.